Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be doing a tutorial on the value of depeasanting peasants, that is turning peasants into any other profession by constructing a building. There is additional value beyond just the efficiency of the new building. Now this is something that I haven't done as close a dive on, and looking into it I realized that I was making a pretty substantive mistake when evaluating the value of this, and I was thinking that it was way higher than it actually is, so we will be going into that a little bit as well because we've talked about this somewhat in the past. This episode is also going to serve as a bridge episode or a bridge tutorial between the first episode of our Jewish Japan run. You can see it's definitely Jewish Japan, and also in the next one. And the main idea here in terms of the context of what will be relevant is there's a very interesting building in the rice farm, because the rice farm in Victoria 3 is the building that is the absolute best at depeasanting pops as quickly as possible. You can see here it employs 6,000 farmers and 14,000 laborers for just a level 2 building. That means it has 10,000 employees instead of 5,000, but it still costs the very same 200 construction as every other agrarian building. So this means you can depeasant 10,000 pops for just 200 construction. So let's talk briefly about how the crypto bro peasants work economically speaking, specifically the features that are important to us as it relates to them producing value, and that is how their income works and also how their spending works. For their income, they receive this subsistence output figure. This is supposed to represent the fact that they are building their own clothes, their own furniture, growing their own crops, these sorts of things. And this subsistence output doesn't interact with the market. Instead, it's a free money type of thing, which in theory should really, really juice up the economy, because if you inject a whole bunch of additional buy orders into the economy, these guys are buying a buy basket for a 10 wealth level pop. When you introduce a bunch of buy orders to the economy, you stimulate the economy. So this looks like, hey, this is just free value. Why doesn't it produce value? Well, the idea is, if we come into the society tab, or I think it's population census data, and we look at the peasants and we scroll to the tab over, we can hover over anything that they're producing and we will see this modifier that gets applied to them. Consumption factor over here is 0.05 for peasants, and what this means is that all of the peasants' buy orders for all the goods that they consume are multiplied by 5% when they reach the market. So in terms of the buy orders for the pops, in terms of who's consuming what, the peasants will be virtually nothing, or proportionally way, way smaller than they ought to be. We have more peasants than we have laborers here in Japan, and yet they are consuming 1/6 the grain. That is because so few of the buy orders reach the market, and this is to represent the fact that the peasants are not interacting with the market, but rather they are producing their own goods, so their buy orders shouldn't reach the market. And it is the lack of the buy orders reaching the market that is the site of some money deletion effects. And when you turn peasants into not peasants, you get rid of these money deletion effects, and instead all of their buy orders will be reaching the market. Okay, how are these buy orders valuable? Why do we care about them reaching the market? Well, every single building has output goods, right? And for most of the time, on most production methods, they will also have input goods. The value that the building produces is equal to the net, that is the output minus the input, and this is the value that the building produces. And we have this spreadsheet here where we are looking at all of these on base prices, and so we could say that the sawmills PM with an output of 1,200 and an input of 200 value will have a net value added of 1,000. What the buy orders for the peasants do will in general drive up prices in the market, and in doing so allow you to have more opportunities for more profitable buildings. What we mean by this is if we increase the input goods costs and the output goods costs both by 50%, we will increase also our net value added by 50%. And so in this way, increasing prices is valuable. Conversely, what will happen is when we produce goods, when we are building a whole bunch of sawmills, because the output value is in excess of the input value, this will cause prices to come down. So if we produce a ton of wood in this way, the output value will come down, not because more wood is being produced, not because less wood is being produced, but because the price of wood goes down, and then the value goes down as well. When we keep all other things equal and we depeasant a pop, and then that pop is now sending more of their consumer goods buy orders to the market, what we effectively get, taking a look at the textile mills here, is we effectively increase the value of the outputs. Not because more output goods are being increased, but instead because the prices are being increased because now more buy orders are reaching the market. So we see that these dye workshops, textile mills on the dye workshops PM, have a value output of 800. If we increase the price of the good, what will end up happening of the output goods is the net value produced will increase. And so this means that our dye workshops will be more profitable, or we will have more opportunities to build profitable dye workshops. And this is the value of depeasanting pops in terms of creating additional buy orders in the market. So what did I get wrong, or what have I been getting wrong in terms of how I've thought about peasants, not having taken a much closer look at them other than knowing that there was going to be this positive effect from depeasanting? Well, it turns out it's roughly 20 to 25% of the effect that I thought it was. But what I was thinking was, if you have a peasant with 10 SOL, and you turn them into a laborer, then whatever buy package required to get up to 10 SOL or 10 wealth would be, in terms of the buy orders reaching the market, would just be 20x'd. And this is true. The buy order will be 20x, but in my mind, I was receiving, or there was a reception of this value, and the problem is, this double counts, and it was the double counting that I was not aware of. If we go back into kind of looking at this, the PMs, in terms of their outputs, or the net value added, this applies to both wages and also dividends. And what I was doing is I was double counting the value that would be created in the wages when I was thinking about the value of depeasanting. And let's take a closer look at a building, so we can kind of get a little bit of an idea. If we take a look at this building, we will see there's a weekly balance in the wages. This is the value of the net in total, and part of the wages, what this is doing is creating buy packages, which is raising the price of goods, which is helping to stimulate the economy, so this is a good thing. But a big part of this is paying for the SOL of the peasants that have been swapped over, and to count the depeasanting effect, the 20xing of their old buy package, and this would be committing the error of counting the value of wages twice. Instead, if we take a look at the peasant, the problem is that looking at a peasant, a big portion of why they can afford this is with the free fake money that they were receiving when they were a crypto bro peasant, aka their subsistence output. If we take a look at the weekly pop income, we will see their subsistence output here is 121k. This is free money that is getting created, and this goes away. So instead, we are still receiving extra value from depeasanting. It is just substantially less than what I thought it was. Again, like 20 to 25%, and this figure makes a lot of sense. Now, to be fair, the subsistence output, 5% of this is reaching buy orders in terms of just free stimulus to the market, right? But 95% of the other income that peasants are receiving, that is the total income here of 163k, this is getting effectively diluted because it is not added to buy orders. So when you depeasant a pop, what you are really doing is you are getting value out of the dependence income, additional value out of the dependence income primarily, and then you will also effectively getting extra value off of what income you have off of them from wages, but this is relatively marginal. It's a very small portion of their overall income. It is roughly a third of dependent wages. I guess it adds up to being, 25%, something like this. But the larger point is that I was overestimating the value of depeasanting by around 4x. But with that said, let's take a look at the value of depeasant. So what we have here is sort of the first calculation that I did when trying to figure out how much value was created in the peasants, and this involved me taking a look at a lot of the variables over and over again because I wasn't getting values that I thought made sense. There were some values that really didn't make sense, but we have the idea of a depeasanted adjusted net, where we are adding extra value onto the net value added of every single PM here in the spreadsheet. Now, it is important to note for this depeasanted net, we are reverse engineering it by taking SOL first and then working backwards from there, making sure to minus the amount of money that is stimulus from subsistence income and would be stimulated from subsistence income, which is why this is significantly decreased. And also, we are minusing the entire value of the sub-farm itself. So the fact that this is positive is significant. The overall value that is created by depeasanting the pop is 85, but it is because we have to minus the value that is being produced in a subsistence farm. Here we have a subsistence farm, it produces 77.5 value. When we depeasant, we do lose the value of a subsistence farm, and so the fact that we have to subtract this out means that it is going to be smaller, but it is still overall positive. So the overall value of depeasanting, as we have calculated it here, is roughly 85. Now, there's going to be several variables that are going to determine and change things up a little bit, and the range is probably between 70 and 100 will be the overall value of depeasanting 5,000 laborers in total. That is at least before you include the value you are getting off of the subsistence farm itself. When you include that, we see the very, very modest 18 positive value being produced per 5,000 laborers. But I think there's something very, very significant in the fact that it's positive, that is at the very least illustrative, which is that if you had to choose between depeasanting or employing an unemployed pop, from a purely economic perspective, because unemployed pops have a ton of malices, it's actually better, economically speaking, to turn a peasant into not a peasant than it is to give an unemployed person a job, which is significant. Now, there are a lot of variables that will affect this, one of which, for example, being let's jump back into game to take a look at some of these, one of which being if the peasants are receiving any type of dividends, those dividends, in terms of the value that they reach the market in terms of buy orders, will be times by 0.5%. So dividends income is worse on the peasants. Also, notably, there are things that affect how much dependent wages you are getting. We are getting a juiced up dependent wages, for example, because we have child labor here. So the child labor will juice this up. The amount of money that is getting deleted by losing your subsistence output is going to vary depending on what type of subsistence output PM you are on. So for example, if you are on serfdom, you only get 3 subsistence output. If you're on homesteading or free peasants, you will get 4 subsistence output. So the 0.05% that you are getting juiced from the free money is larger under this, but also these PMs will produce more grain, and so the amount you need to subtract from the value of the subsistence farm is also increased. And so again, there's a lot of variables that can change here. Also here, if we're on homesteading, then we actually decrease the number of peasants. So per subsistence farm, we're actually only depeasanting 4,900 rather than this extra 100, and the 100 is going to change things up a little bit. But overall, I think it's worth it to look at it from this perspective, that it's this modest amount that is still somewhat substantive. I think it's worth contextualizing this 70 to 100% figure for context to show why it's still substantive, because the net value added here, we're saying that we're only adding an extra 18, but if we are really being real about the net value added here, we have to take into account the fact that we're overriding a building. We are taking employees from another building that was producing value, in this case the subsistence farm, right, that was producing 77 of value, and we're putting it in this new building. So in truth, this value here should be 922.5 or whatever the number is, which means that when we add on top of that around 80 or 70 or something like this, we are in effect adding somewhere in the realm of 8 to 10% value on top of the sawmills, which is particularly substantive, and it's going to be much more value in general on the lower construction buildings. And so while this 18 figure doesn't look substantive, the proper context is thinking of this as being much lower, and so when you do that, you see that it is adding a pretty big chunk of value, but nowhere near as big of a chunk of value as I thought it was previously. So we started with talking about rice farms being the most powerful depeasanting tool, so I thought we'd kind of, knowing what we know now, take a look at the rice farms. And the first kind of important thing to note is that subsistence rice farms actually have a different efficiency rate than a subsistence farm. A subsistence farm employs 5,000 laborers, 77.5 is the output. A subsistence rice farm employs 10,000, so it's double, but the output's not doubled. The output is a little bit less than double, which means depeasanting anyone off of a subsistence rice farm, all other things equal, is slightly more valuable than depeasanting them off of a regular subsistence farm. There's other subsistence farms with slightly different outputs. I don't think that there's a sharp differentiation in the value produced, though, like there is here. I just think like you produce fruit or meat or something else instead of one of the other things, but the value is roughly the same, although I haven't looked at this since they changed the PMs a little while back, so I could be mistaken and they could have rebalanced them. But taking a look at the subsistence rice farms, we will see, if we kind of highlight one of these, that at first blush we see 90 efficiency per week of construction, and then we see 94 here, so we can say, hey, it's adding roughly 5 of value, but we have to remember this value here should really include, or this marginal value here versus this 46 versus this just 900, which incidentally, this 46 much bigger than the 18 we were seeing in the tooling workshop. This is not including the fact that we would have to subtract this net value added from this here. So instead of being around, what would this be, 750, instead of being around 750 on soil enriched farming, with that with accounting for depeasanting effects, it would be 950 per unit of construction, which is an insane come up in terms of the value. It's nearly 20 to 30% increase in terms of the value of the building when you consider the depeasanting. So in the particulars of building rice farms, the effect starts to get really big just because of how disgustingly efficient rice farms are per construction. If rice farms cost double construction, which they kind of should, instead you would see the phenomenon be cut in half entirely because it's still depeasanting the same amount, but we're calculating efficiency per construction here, and so this is pretty substantive. I thought it was worth pointing out. Rice farm spamming is particularly powerful for just inducing extra demand for other goods, and so when we spam rice, we're going to drive up the prices of all of our consumer goods because of the depeasanting effect, because we're getting a bunch of people on this, and so this will be pretty strong. The thing is, you can't spam them too much. You cannot spam them too much to drive up the price of, the consumer goods, allowing you to get bigger and bigger nets here. And the reason you cannot spam them too much is because eventually, at a certain point, you will collapse the price of wheat. And this is only valuable because the output is expensive. If you got half prices on these, you would really sharply... Ooh, that's not half price. If you cut the value of grain in half, you would very sharply decrease the value you're producing in the building. And so moving forward, as we kind of think about what we'll be doing in this Japan run here, is we are going to start building quite a lot of rice while simultaneously trying to keep up the demand for grain and don't let the grain prices collapse. This is going to be the plan. But I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Do the YouTube algorithm thing, including hitting the notification bell. We often forget that one. And other than that, have a good one. Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to get a hair in our mouth before we start recording our episode.